In March 2025, the President of the United States stood before Congress and dropped a geopolitical bombshell. We will annex Greenland, one way or another. The world froze. Was this a power move or a desperate one? While headlines exploded and allies panicked, another nation made its move, silently. No threats, no fanfare, just quiet diplomacy. And within weeks, Greenland signed a $3 billion deal, not with the US, but with Canada. In one of the coldest regions on Earth, the biggest power play of the decade was underway. But the winner wasn't the loudest. It was the one no one saw coming. Number one, the US makes a shocking threat. It was March 12, 2025, an otherwise routine day in Washington, until President Donald Trump stepped up to the podium before Congress and uttered 12 words that would send shockwaves across the globe. We will annex Greenland to the United States, one way or another. The silence in the chamber was deafening. What started years earlier as a seemingly offhand remark about buying Greenland had transformed into a direct political threat from the world's most powerful nation. The message was clear. This wasn't a joke anymore. The US wasn't asking, they were declaring. Almost immediately, the backlash came thundering in. Denmark, which oversees Greenland as part of its kingdom, called the statement absurd and unacceptable. Greenland's prime minister was even more direct. Greenland is not a commodity. We are not for sale. Within hours, the European Union issued a firm rebuke, warning that any attempt to undermine Greenland's sovereignty would trigger severe diplomatic consequences. The world watched in disbelief. Was the US really about to reignite 19th century-style imperialism? Or was this just political theater aimed at distracting from deeper issues at home? But beneath the headlines and outrage, something much more serious was unfolding, something most people missed. Greenland isn't just a frozen wasteland of glaciers and icebergs. It's sitting on top of one of the richest caches of rare minerals on Earth, materials that are absolutely essential for powering electric vehicles, advanced weaponry, clean energy tech, and the digital economy of the future. These aren't just rocks. They're the building blocks of the next global order. And whoever controls Greenland's mineral flow holds the keys to tomorrow's strategic supply chains. While the world argued about sovereignty, missiles, and maps, a much quieter game had already begun. And in that game, one unlikely player was already 10 steps ahead, without making a sound. Number two, the real reason everyone wants Greenland. Forget the ice, forget the cold. Greenland isn't just a remote frozen island. It's ground zero in the global resource war of the 21st century. Geographically, it holds a position that keeps military analysts up at night. Nestled in the Arctic between North America and Europe, Greenland sits right over what experts call the Arctic blind spot, a dangerous radar gap that leaves Alaska vulnerable to stealth submarines and hypersonic threats from adversaries like Russia and China. Whoever controls Greenland doesn't just get land, they get visibility, early warning capabilities, and the upper hand in the next generation defense race. But the real reason global powers are circling Greenland like hawks? It's buried deep beneath the ice. This island is packed with strategic minerals, the kind you can't find just anywhere. Molybdenum, graphite, and rare earth elements, all essential to making electric vehicles, smart tech, renewable energy systems, and high-performance military gear. These aren't luxury materials. They're necessities. And as global demand explodes, supply chains are tightening. Right now, China controls 87% of the world's rare earth exports. The remaining 13%, scattered, unstable, or already locked down. For the US, that's a strategic nightmare. Being cut off from these resources means being left behind in clean tech, AI hardware, missile guidance systems, you name it. Greenland represents one of the last untapped sources of these critical minerals. Not only are the deposits massive, but they're also relatively close to North American and European markets. That's why Washington's sudden obsession makes sense. They're not just chasing territory, they're chasing survival. But while the US tried to strong-arm its way in, another country took a radically different approach. One that didn't involve threats, annexation, or radar bases. And before America could even react, it had already lost the most important race of the decade. Number three, U.S. pressure versus Canada's patience. After the annexation threat, May pasay pa papiri siya ganun. The U.S. didn't stop. It doubled down. The Pentagon rushed to revive long-forgotten Arctic defense blueprints. Proposals to expand the Thule Air Base were dusted off. Military planners floated the idea of deploying cutting-edge radar systems along Greenland's northern coast, an effort to seal the radar blind spot that had haunted U.S. strategic planners for years. On paper, it looked like a show of strength. In reality, it was a move born of panic. The strategy was simple: pressure, presence, and power. But Greenland didn't flinch. There were no angry speeches, no dramatic press conferences, just one chillingly calm response from Greenland's leadership: Greenland is not a commodity. Then came the silence. And behind that silence, the most unexpected pivot in modern geopolitics. While the U.S. was flexing its muscles, Canada was flying under the radar, literally. No threats, no bold declarations, just quiet diplomacy, quiet visits, quiet agreements. In late 2024, Canada's newly elected Prime Minister made a discreet trip to Europe. Instead of making headlines, he made history, signing a series of under-the-radar agreements with the EU. These meetings weren't about domination, they were about cooperation. And Greenland was watching closely. Just months later, while the world was still reeling from Washington's aggressive stance, Greenland inked a $3 billion mineral extraction deal, not with the U.S., but with a Canadian company, 30 years of mining rights, billions in revenue, strategic access to one of the world's rarest and most valuable materials. The U.S. brought pressure. Canada brought patience. The difference was trust. Where one nation tried to take, the other offered to build. Greenland didn't choose a superpower. It chose a partner. And in doing so, it rewrote the rules of influence in the Arctic forever. Number 4. Why Greenland said yes to Canada. Greenland didn't just sign a contract. They made a statement. When Canada stepped in, they didn't come with ultimatums. They came with something far more powerful in today's world: respect. And Greenland noticed. The terms of the deal? Surprisingly strict, and that's exactly why it worked. At least 70% of the workforce involved in mining operations had to be Greenlandic. That wasn't negotiable. For Canada, it wasn't a problem. They embraced it. While other nations might have pushed back, Canada leaned in, committing to build not just projects, but people. Then came the money. 10% of all profits were earmarked for the Greenland Future Fund, a trust designed to fuel education, healthcare, and local infrastructure for generations to come. No clever tax loopholes, no vague promises, just a straight pipeline from profits to progress. And perhaps most importantly, the deal demanded strict environmental standards aligned with the European Union's toughest regulations. These weren't optional, and yet again, Canada didn't flinch. They agreed without hesitation: no military bases, no radar outposts, no aircraft deployments, or sovereignty games. Just a firm handshake and a promise to treat Greenland as an equal. That's what made the difference. Greenland didn't want a master. They weren't looking for the highest bidder or the most powerful name. What they wanted was a partner, a country that didn't see them as a pawn on a geopolitical chessboard, but as a sovereign nation with its own voice, its own values, and its own future. Canada offered exactly that. While the U.S. brought tension, Canada brought trust. While others saw Greenland as a prize to win, Canada saw it as a partner to work with. And in today's volatile world, that kind of sincerity is rare and valuable. The message from Nuuk was clear. We don't want control, we want cooperation, and Canada gave us both. Number 5. America's quiet collapse in the Arctic. As the dust settled, the real damage began to show, not in Washington's press rooms, but in corporate boardrooms across America. Major U.S. giants like Ford, General Motors, and Lockheed Martin suddenly found themselves staring at a hard truth. The minerals they counted on were now locked behind someone else's door. Molybdenum, graphite, rare earths, the core ingredients in everything from electric vehicle batteries to missile casings, were no longer within reach. Greenland, one of the last untapped frontiers for these materials, had just signed it all away to Canada. For America's booming EV industry, the timing couldn't be worse. Companies were racing to meet government deadlines under the Inflation Reduction Act, which offered massive tax breaks, but only if minerals came from domestic or free trade partners. Greenland wasn't on that list, and without access, those tax credits and production targets began slipping through their fingers. In defense circles, the fallout was just as brutal. Lockheed Martin, which had been banking on molybdenum for hypersonic missile shells, was forced to halt testing indefinitely. Raytheon, eyeing Greenland as a future supplier for radar systems, had to pivot toward costlier imports from Chile and Australia, stretching budgets and timelines. But here's the cruelest twist of all. Some of Canada's Arctic victories were funded by American money. Buried in the fine print of Greenland's mining projects were private equity deals. One Toronto-based firm, Amaroq Minerals, quietly raised $45 million, with a portion of that coming from U.S. investment groups. In short, American investors, hoping for global returns, had unknowingly bankrolled Canada's rise and their own country's strategic failure. So while the U.S. government postured and pressured, its corporations watched supply chains fracture. And in the Arctic, America's influence didn't just stall, it cracked. The superpower had lost ground. Not to China, not to Russia, but to the quiet neighbor it never saw coming. Number 6. Canada's global rise, from middle power to kingmaker. While the U.S. stumbled in the Arctic, Canada was rewriting the rules of global influence without ever raising its voice. In early 2025, something unprecedented happened. At the annual EU summit, the name of the event quietly changed. The EU-Canada Strategic Forum. Not a headline-grabbing move, but behind the scenes it signaled a dramatic shift in Europe's power priorities. Canada had become more than a trade partner. It was now the EU's official Arctic collaborator, chosen to co-lead critical projects in energy, defense, and environmental sustainability. And at the heart of this partnership, a game-changing financial engine, the Arctic Green Transition Fund, a $3.1 billion pool dedicated to sustainable mining, infrastructure, and rare mineral development across Greenland and the Arctic. Guess who's not part of it? The United States. Instead of chasing headlines, Canada earned trust in boardrooms and back channels. They integrated directly into Europe's next-generation supply chain strategy, positioning themselves as the indispensable link between Greenland's raw resources and the continent's green future. Steel for bridges, graphite for EV batteries, molybdenum for high-performance alloys, all flowing through Canadian firms, governed by EU regulations, and backed by shared climate goals. Canada wasn't just selling minerals, it was selling credibility. And they didn't stop there. Canada became one of the few non-European nations included in the EU's defense coordination plans, linking its Arctic mining infrastructure to Europe's long-term military readiness. That meant exclusive contracts, protected shipping routes, and even shared satellite intelligence systems, all without a single military deployment. No speeches, no saber rattling, just results. In a world where global power is often measured by how loud a nation shouts, Canada did something radical. They listened. They partnered. They invested in others' visions rather than forcing their own. And while Washington scrambled to save face, Ottawa was busy becoming the new gatekeeper of Arctic influence. Number 7, the soft power playbook. Why Canada's model works. Canada didn't win Greenland by outspending or outmuscling anyone. It won by playing a completely different game. While traditional powers push for fast wins and instant leverage, Canada played the long game, built on patience, respect, and quiet diplomacy. No pressure tactics, no hidden agendas, just a steady commitment to shared goals. It wasn't just about mining rights, it was about how they were earned. Where the U.S. demanded access, Canada asked what Greenland needed. Where others saw a resource-rich prize, Canada saw a community worth investing in. That difference was everything. Greenland's leaders didn't want another global superpower staking claims over their land. They wanted a collaborator, someone who respected their voice, their environment, and their people. And Canada delivered. It agreed to environmental safeguards that others resisted. It signed on to workforce requirements that many corporations tried to water down. And it promised, without hesitation, to share profits in a way that benefited Greenland's future, not just Canada's balance sheet. Meanwhile, the U.S. stuck to old habits, fast deals, firm hands, and one-sided terms. But in today's world, hard power is no longer enough. Canada proved that influence isn't just about force, it's about trust. And trust is built through consistency, respect, and shared values. This wasn't just a win for Canada, it was a validation of a new kind of diplomacy, one where soft power doesn't mean weakness, but wisdom. And in the case of Greenland, it was that wisdom that turned a middle power into a regional leader. Sometimes the strongest nations are the ones that don't need to raise their voices to be heard. Number 8, Greenland's quiet revolution and what it means for the world. What happened in Greenland isn't just a mineral deal. It's a signal, a quiet revolution in how global power works. For decades, the story of international influence was written by superpowers. Big budgets, bigger weapons, bold demands. But in the Arctic, something else unfolded. A small, autonomous nation, long overlooked, outmaneuvered the most powerful country on Earth. And it didn't need an army to do it. Greenland rewrote the rules by choosing values over volume. Instead of bowing to pressure, it looked for partnership. Instead of rushing into flashy deals, it sought long-term cooperation, and in doing so, it exposed a weakness in the traditional playbook of global dominance. At the same time, Canada, a quiet middle power, emerged as a new kind of global player, one that doesn't force influence, but earns it. It didn't compete by shouting louder. It competed by showing up with integrity, aligning with global priorities like sustainability, fairness, and respect for sovereignty. This story isn't just about two countries. It's about what comes next. In a world growing tired of zero-sum power games, Greenland's decision may be the blueprint for other small nations. What happens when countries stop asking who's strongest and start asking who listens best? In a world where power is shifting in silence, stories like Greenland's deserve to be told and understood. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were a small nation, which strategy would you choose, force or diplomacy? Drop your insight below. If you found this eye-opening, check out our last video. It connects the dots even deeper. Support our work by subscribing. It's just one click.